Let's talk about just complete media ignorance of some very large stories. The vaccine mandates, the vaccine passports, there have been some glimmers of hope in coverage where reporters, especially the longer the pandemic has gone on, have doggedly advanced on this story. The questions about why are mask policies so inconsistent and why do we need these mandates in Canada and not elsewhere. But Rupa Subramanya, our colleague at True North, who also writes for a variety of other publications, had a tremendous piece in Barry Weiss's Substack, Common Sense, which delved into federal court documents in an ongoing trial. And these were documents filed by the court, filed by the Canadian government in court in its defense of a lawsuit against the vaccine mandate for air travel. And what she found is that the travel ban for the unvaccinated had no basis in science. The panel that was responsible for putting it together was stocked by people that didn't have scientific backgrounds, didn't have health backgrounds. The person in charge was a bureaucrat, not a public health expert. And really, this suggests, as Rupa finds in the documents and says in her piece, that it was all just a matter of politics and not science. So certainly something we've talked about in the past, Harrison, but the big story here on a secondary front has been that 3 days later, not a single journalist that I've seen in Canada has picked up the torch and moved on with this story.
Well, this is what Canadians, I think, should come to expect, Andrew. Independent journalists like Rupa, journalists like the ones we have here at True North and other outlets that have actually been holding the government to account this entire time, continue to do their job. And the mainstream journalists, the legacy media journalists, who many of them are on the take from the government, consistently failed to hold the government to account. So this is just no different, really. This is a huge bombshell report that Rupa wrote in Common Sense, and basically it kind of confirms what we've all known, Andrew, which is this is all based in politics. Justin Trudeau seems to have a different definition of science than the rest of the world, and Canadians, because of that, have had to suffer. So when Rupa publishes this post, not only does the legacy media not do anything, sit on their hands, and basically by doing that, covering for Trudeau, you actually see, maybe it's not the journalists themselves, but you see people who are supportive of the Prime Minister attacking journalists like Rupa for making the truth and getting the truth out to Canadians. This is the biggest story that we've been living under. These draconian travel measures that have been leveled against Canadians is the most important thing that we need to be holding the government to account over. And of course, what else should we expect, Andy? The legacy media is not going to do a single bit of reporting. I will say I'd be put money on this, that in 2 to 3 weeks, journalists in the legacy media, maybe like the National Post, might eventually come around to the story. They might eventually write the story, but of course, not give any credit to the journalist that broke the story. Where have we seen that before? And of course, just pretend as though they're breaking news that has been broken for weeks already. It's repealing these mandates, repealing these measures that are not based in science is the most important issue facing Canadians right now. At least I believe that, and I'm pretty confident that most Canadians agree with me. So the idea that when journalists break this news and MSM journalists, legacy media journalists with bigger audiences and bigger platforms do nothing, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm a big Substack fan. I've got my own Substack, so I'll put in a shameless plug there. You can subscribe to that at andrewlawton.substack.com. And I'm a subscriber to Common Sense, the idea of Common Sense, and also the Substack Common Sense. Yeah. And the thing that I find fascinating here is that it's another one of these examples where Canadians are forced to look outside their own country to get coverage that journalists inside the country should be putting forward. Now, obviously, there are sometimes when stories just happen to get broken outside, like the Trudeau blackface photo, the initial one came from Time magazine, just because of a personal connection between the Time reporter and the person who leaked the photo. And in this case, Rupa's Canadian. She's got a relationship with Common Sense. It was a great platform for it. Fine. But you look at the Freedom Convoy, and one of the themes I've talked about in my book, and we've talked about it at True North, is that by and large, Canadians were better served by outlets like Fox News and GB News, and even the New York Times on a couple of occasions, than they were by Canadian legacy media outlets. And for all that we see a government that likes to harp on the importance of Canadian content and Canadian media needs to step up, because a lot of these stories are only getting covered by outlets outside the country.